is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. When people say that he's a historian, he says, "Damn it, Jim, I'm a collector." Horvath.
That's a good joke, and that leads it. I didn't tell you how my intro is going to go, but you folded in very nicely. You're gonna be pleased with yourself.
Thanks, man. You know, I got this on the fly. It might sound a little different, dear listener. I'm actually just we're in the process of moving office for where I live, so I'm just kind of in between recording spaces right now. But yeah, man, you told me Star Trek, and I was like, I got this one.
Yeah. So talking about collecting, I have too much stuff. I don't know if you realize this, but I have a lot of things.
You don't say.
I have, at last count, I have 6,863 things that I consider my collection.
So that's just the keeping pile.
No, that's everything as of like a week and a half ago. That's not like, I have records that I don't consider part of my collection. I have books and stuff that are not technically part of the collection. The formal, right. So there's more stuff in the house, but the thing that the horrible monster, the monkey on my back, is nearly 7,000 goddamn things. So I decided to get rid of a lot of it.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, I've basically gone through the entire collection piece by piece, deciding, what sparks joy. And 910 items do not spark joy, and they will be going up for sale to folks in the Discord and then into the wider world soon.
Okay, that's pretty cool though. Like that's a nice sizable chunk, I mean, still a lot of paper floating around your house, but 910 seems reasonable. Is that what the stamps that you posted on the Instagram stories were for?
It is, yeah. So my idea was that I would make a stamp that said like withdrawn from my library. And then Daisy, being a librarian, was like, well, if you have a stamp that says, withdrawn from the library, you need an Ex Libris stamp that says like from the library of. So now I have two, and apparently I'm going to have to stamp it 6,863 times.
I love that so much. That adds such a little chef's kiss, little bow on the top of it. That really, I think that was the missing piece, dude. Like after all these years, that works. That's great.
I do like the idea of sort of discarding these things into the world, but having marked them in a way.
Yeah.
Sort of like it has like a trail, a legacy attached to it now. And even stuff that I'm not getting rid of now, like all my Arkham House books, a lot of them came from other collectors who have their own names in it. So it'll be kind of cool to stamp my name in there for future collectors to go, oh, hey, this was owned by that guy who wrote that book that nobody really remembers, but he seems nice.
I love that so much. I think that's such a great little idea. It's funny because we talked about it many times over the years of this show, how it's always cool when you find that old RPG relic that has like a dude's name written inside of it, because
right.
Like Bob played this thing and he loved it, or maybe it was like one of those really hard modules and like his friend group never like talked to each other again after it. But we're gonna go high on that. Bob had a good time playing Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, but that's cool, man. So when are you gonna start the sale?
Hopefully I have about 100 things left to price, and weirdly, I find that the act of sitting here at my computer pricing things, so that requires searching and averaging and then typing and cutting and pasting a lot, really does a number on my neck. So I'm going to finish it and I'm going to pause for a couple days so I don't have to deal with the spreadsheet. So probably next week sometime after this episode starts. Everybody in the Discord has dibs because it'll be easier to manage the sale there so that they get first crack at it. So if you're listening to this and you want to buy some of my junk, my high grade collector's items, come on into the Discord. There's a link in the show notes that you can use and get ready to have your wallet hurt a lot because,
even more so than we normally do.
So what does this have to do with Star Trek? I'll tell you what
Ah.
this has to do with Star Trek.
It's one of the books you're selling. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah. So
Advertising?
back in I think it was 2020. I think it was during the heights of the pandemic. Our buddy Zog found that listing. It was like 500 pounds of role playing books for $400, and I convinced him to buy it and split it with me out in Vancouver. And I remember those boxes arrived. It was like a stack of boxes on my steps, and it was one of those like Arrested Development moments where it's just like I've made a terrible mistake. In that, and there was I think 500 600 books in that, maybe more. It was crazy. It covered my entire dining room table when we got it out in like varying levels. Like it wasn't just flat. And one of the things that was the most had the most density in what my share of the collection was FASA's Star Trek, a game that I had no real exposure to, didn't really know existed before that point. And all of a sudden, I had the entirety of the run, basically. I think there's maybe like 3 or 4 pieces that came out that I didn't have. It's just like, holy crap, I have all this Star Trek stuff. I don't even like Star Trek that much. I can like it fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like a kind of a weird like. It's not really your bag per se, and now you have all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And no shade. It's just not to my taste. It's, like I just don't need this much Star Trek is where I'm at now. I was just like it's cool. And there's stuff that I like about it, but like I don't need all this Star Trek. But because I've been going through everything, and because there's so much Star Trek stuff, I've really contemplated the game in the last week. And I thought it would be cool to do an episode on it before, there's a burial in space for most of it. It is a cool game. It's like the second or third or fourth licensed game. Actually, the very first licensed RPG was a Star Trek RPG. It was like 1977 or 78. The Heritage, I think it was Heritage USA at that point, primarily a manufacturer of miniatures, created this really weak RPG based on Star Trek so that they could basically sell Star Trek miniatures. That was the very first licensed RPG. Nobody really remembers it.
You know what, man? I'm gonna say at this point of the episode, I'm normally like, "Whoa, really?" Very, very surprised. But I'm gonna tell you right now, dear listener, the first time ever, your old buddy HB is not surprised that Star Trek was the first licensed tabletop RPG because that makes absolute sense.
It was really, in terms of like nerd properties to turn into role-playing games, like it was really the only game in town. Star Wars was around, but like nobody thought to do Star Wars or Middle Earth until later, which boggles my mind. It also just makes sense that Trek would be there first. Like Trek was just such a powerful fandom back then.
Exactly.
And starved. So like Star Wars was like happening, like 77, it comes out and like it's new and it's fresh and people are excited about this thing that is current to their existence. By 78, like there wasn't really any Star Trek going on. Like you had the original series, you had the cartoon, and maybe at that point, no, I mean the movie was 79. So like depending on when the Heritage game came out, you had some novels, maybe some comic books. I don't even know. Like there's just not a lot there, but you have a group of people who are so like into it. We used to make fun of Trekkies. There was a documentary about Trekkies when like
yeah.
But like think back to when the Trekkie documentary came out and that kind of fandom was sort of unusual. Now it's the norm, but like Trekkies were always out there first. So yeah, it really is unsurprising that they had the first licensed game.
Isn't that funny though to think that like the way fandom is now, like if there's fandom, everyone's got fandom. You got like Star Trek fandom, Star Wars fandom, Supernatural fandom. Probably have like a Babylon 5 fandom, Doctor Who, Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, the Lord of the Rings stuff. I'm like losing fingers to count on. Like there are deep fandoms now, right? But like it's so funny where we live in an age where fandom is like so accepted and understood. Yet at some point, there was a time when like Star Trek fandom was like, huh, but not those guys.
Right? Like
there was judgment.
There was serious judgment. I don't think I ever saw the Trekkie documentary. There might have been 2 at the same time. I feel like they might have been a twinning at the moment now that I'm speaking about it. But I don't think I ever saw either of them. But I bet if we watched them, they'd be super judgy. You know, I think it would be like, this is a celebration, but holy wow, look at those guys over there. They're weird, you know? Like I think that
Crazy.
right. And now it's been totally normalized. Like just the idea of dressing up as characters was super strange back then. And now cosplay is like a whole hobby into and of itself.
Listen, man, those Trekkies walked so juggalos could run. You know,
It's true.
respect
really
where
think that
respect is due.
Man, we haven't even gotten to the meat of this podcast yet.
I know we're just having too much fun. Go on, tell us the meat.
People are always like make them longer. Well, this is what happens when you get long. We'd start talking about juggalos. So the Heritage game was really just support for the miniatures line, and it didn't really go anywhere. So a couple years later, FASA picks it up. FASA is probably best known for Shadowrun and Earth Dawn later in the late 80s, early 90s. But they got their start. This is interesting. They got their start doing licensed work for the Traveler game from GDW.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. And their Traveler output is super. It's really interesting. I like it generally. It's all in sort of zine format, but they also did some stuff that's like semi-official. Like I think Mark Miller has an introduction in one of the zines, and they put out these box sets of deck plans for Traveler ships that felt very like semi-canon. I mean, these terms that like the idea of canon, like IP canon, was not really something that existed in the way we know it now. But these felt more official than a lot of other third-party Traveler stuff, and they did a good job at it. But then they decided that they wanted to do their own thing, and they bought the Star Trek license, which is a natural thing to kind of piggyback off of Traveler with.
I mean, it sure beats Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, just about everything beats Dallas. FASA is so weird. Like when I was writing, this is like a total aside, but like when I was writing the book, my editor kept coming back with like, we should spell out what FASA stands for. And I was like, no one cares what FASA stands for. Like, and like, it was just one of those things where like, it was just like a cultural thing. Like, I know I had faith in my readers that they would understand that FASA is just the name of the company. It doesn't really stand for anything. If it does, people have claimed that it stands for the Freedonian Aeronautics and Space Administration. But imagine if I had done like at first mention in the book, it's like FASA, the Freedonian Aeronautics and Space Administration. Everybody who knows FASA as like the Shadowrun company would be like, what is he talking about? It would be so confusing. Anyway, that explanation for their acronym kind of speaks to their interest in, you know, spaceborne science fiction in the early days. They hired a bunch of teams to sort of put together demos of potential systems for their Star Trek game. I think it was 4 or 5. And basically what they wound up doing was cloning Traveler. The system is a skill-based system, although it's percentile rather than the 2d6 that Traveler uses. It's very simple. It's lightweight. It's flexible. It shares with Traveler the life path system for character generation, where you roll on a bunch of tables to find out what the character's tours of duties resulted in skill-wise, building out the character. The original box set that comes out in 1982, you're basically limited to playing either the characters from the television show or playing characters that advance through Starfleet. Later supplements would sort of introduce like other paths. You get to have like Klingons and Vulcans, I think, and maybe Romulans and pirates with the Orion source book and merchant traders, a whole bunch of options. But it's basically a simplified reskinning of Traveler, which suits the game really well. And like I said before, like this served like it filled such a huge appetite in the Star Trek community, to the point where, like Star Wars, you had an expanded universe kind of developed through the FASA products that people became very invested in and got very angry about once that canon was tossed out.
No.
Yeah. Star Trek, man, forging the path. Where fandom is, also lurks toxic fandom. And there was a lot of friction and anger when Next Generation comes out, and it changes stuff about the Romulans and about how the Federation borders work and the neutral zone. Like there's just stuff that gets changed in Next Generation that didn't conform to the FASA vision of the Star Trek universe, and people got really bent. I think there was stuff about the Klingon language too that got pitched. So there's like two competing Klingon languages, maybe. I don't know the ins and outs of that sort of Trek lore, but I know that there's a wealth of friction points between the game loyalists and the Roddenberry camp, to the point where like people, like when the game finally does get killed and the license is pulled from FASA, like people literally blame Gene Roddenberry for it. Like it was
Well,
very
listen,
personal,
man.
very angry.
I'm sure that when all that stuff went down with Lucas, Gene sent old George a card being like, buddy, I know. But also at the same time, and I'm not saying that anyone should commit to toxic fandom. However, if I had taken all that time to learn traditional Klingon and they had changed it, I might be a little upset too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex thing. And like it's really easy, 30 years later to be like, this is silly in the extreme.
Yeah, I know.
But
yeah,
but
for real.
but at the time this is something that a lot of people engaged with and grew with over the course of the game, and like it was really important to them, and then it got yanked from underneath them. And I know that from like I have really mixed feelings about how the Star Wars expanded universe from the role-playing game both got yanked and sort of pilfered for modern Star Wars, and it makes me feel funny, and I have sympathy for the Star Trek folks who feel similarly about the FASA stuff. The FASA, it was always going to end poorly because so much of the role-playing game hobby was still so rooted in war games at the time. And what's Star Trek not about?
Yeah.
You can see it really early in almost all of the modules sort of kind of wind up with violent solutions as like the only solution. And they kept like kind of making these strategic ship battle games that like apparently really pissed off Gene Roddenberry. Like he was kind of looking for them to make mistakes after a certain point. The final straw was news that they were developing a ground combat Star Trek game, which I guess made him just absolutely livid. And just the general sentiment that they didn't understand the direction of Next Generation. And in light of that, and all of this stuff up until that point, there was no central authority to kind of control the canon. It was all just like people were allowed to do whatever they wanted. I'm pretty sure that now the cartoon isn't canon at all. Maybe. I don't know. A lot of the novels definitely have been thrown out of the canon, even though like they're beloved novels. And that was around the time that they finally became aware of the fact that we have to kind of control this centrally as an intellectual property so that it makes sense, so that we can have people creating in the universe and not have them contradicting each other. So that was another really big reason why FASA had to kind of lose the license. But the game is pretty cool. I like the box set. The core box set is cool. And I like particularly the fact that it is so geared towards the original TV show, and the cartoon are basically the main touchstones for the game. And that's a really specific kind of Star Trek that I think has been overshadowed in recent years. Certainly my experience with Next Generation was overshadowing of the old stuff. Like I kind of stuck my nose up about it. But it's cool because the action of the game is very much centered around the TV show episodes, where it's like the guys and gals on the bridge are doing the adventuring. And there's a really great ship-to-ship combat system where everybody has a role at the helm, which is cool. It's super cool. And it's one of the first sort of formalized, like kind of LARPy kind of things that I know about in tabletop role playing. So the captain character manages the overall strategy of the battle, right? And then your engineer has to like dedicate the power levels for a given round. And power gets split between targeting shield and damage control, which are controlled by the helmsman, the navigator, and the communications officer. So it almost becomes like board game like or something where the captain is trying to, is issuing orders, but can't actually act on those orders. He has to, the orders are really going to the helmsman, the navigator, and the comms officer, but the engineer is sort of facilitating who could act the most and trying to like balance their actions. I think it's super cool. It's really interesting. And it just lends itself to everybody kind of like rearranging the furniture in their living room and like playing towards like a view screen, like a TV
Right.
or like
The
a
TV.
bulletin board. And I just love that idea. Like, and I mentioned all this stuff in the book, of course, but like it's just like it's so cool. And I just remember that I don't really want to play this, but I do. I want like I don't have a room in the house that I could really kind of futz around with like that, but like it'd be cool if I did.
It actually sounds kind of awesome, man. It sounds kind of super fun. To be honest, like
we all get little lapel pins.
Oh God, I like tchotchkes. You see my battle vest. I've seen your battle vest.
Yeah, that's basically Star Trek in a nutshell. There's all sorts of supplements that are interesting to varying degrees. Lots of modules, adventures that are like so not Star Trek. They don't look like Star Trek. They don't feel like Star Trek when you read it. There's one module, I forget which one what the name is, but like it actually involves two GMs running two separate groups and then having them like come into conflict, which sounds amazing and also like a complete nightmare that no one ever play tested. Like, but it was the Wild West back then.
It was the Wild West back then. Like I could see it working if it was like two enemy ships and you had like the GM and the other GM going head to head, in like space combat, but on the ground. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I believe that one team is like Federation reps, and then the other team is like a merchant trading group, and they both have cross purposes. And of course, there's some sort of alien civilization that's like caught in the crossfire, but it may be pirates. I don't know. It's been a while since I read them, but yeah, I'm keeping two things. I looked through all of them, admired them one last time, put them in the box, added them to the list to sell. I'm keeping the original 1982 box and a adventure module called The Vanishing, which I posted about in the past, which is just such a good mothership adventure waiting to happen. Like it's about like this thing that eats people, sort of, or I don't even remember. There's a thing. No, it isn't. Oh God. Everybody gets downloaded into a computer, and there's also this thing on board that like you're supposed to think is like responsible for the disappearance of all these people, but they're actually just all in the hard drive of the computer. It's so good. It's more of a Twilight Zone science fiction story than a Star Trek, and I think that like you could just totally turn it into like a one-shot mothership adventure that would really knock people's socks off. But those are the only two things I'm keeping out of a pretty substantial stack of Star Trek role-playing game source books, even though I do find, even talking about it now, that I am fond of the weird old game.
Well, man, that's awesome. I like a good repurposing of RPG. So here. This was another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG podcast. Stu, where can the people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Vintage RPG at Instagram. No, that's not how it goes. I'm on Instagram at Vintage RPG. You can find me there. I did some posts on the old Star Trek game. You can find them in the backlog. And then you're going to be cursed to forever wonder my thoughts about the weird and wonderful line of Star Trek, because I won't post about stuff that I don't own. Sorry.
Fair. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG. I mostly post on Instagram because I've been leaving the house. I've been going places. I've been doing stuff. Yeah, there's pictures. I hugged Chewbacca. That was very cool. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/VintageRPG. We've got a behind-the-scenes look at whatever Stu's working on right now. Anything you can talk about?
No, I think in a future episode we'll talk about the dungeon book, and we're coming up on the March 1 year anniversary. We're going to talk about that. But there's stuff going on. but we don't have to like honk the horn or anything.
That's cool. I'm in the same boat. Behind the scenes look at stuff that I'm working on. Hopefully soon we'll be posting a little bit about the not so top secret project I'm working on with the Neon Lord that's just going to come out. And we're pretty excited about that. We have early release episodes for as little as $1 a month. We have a tier where you can play games with Stu, a tier where you can play with me, and we've got a killer Discord community we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/VintageRPG. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.